This video is brought to you by Mouse. Today we're comparing the Samsung Galaxy S23 versus the Samsung Galaxy S22. I've used both of these phones extensively, and while these two look similar on the outside, I can tell you that there are some crucial differences between them in key areas such as the camera, battery life, performance, as well as longevity, all of which you want to consider carefully when choosing between these two phones. Don't worry guys, in this video I'm going to be covering everything you need to know. But first, I am doing a giveaway on this brand new iPhone 14. If you want a chance to win, be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, and leave a comment with your Instagram username. And then follow me on Instagram, where I will announce the winner on April the 29th. So to start, let's talk about the price. Now the S23 comes in at $799 and can be bought straight from Samsung, and this here is the 128GB variant, where the S22 can also be bought from Samsung for $699, also 128GB, though if you look on third-party sites like eBay or Amazon, I have seen it for as low as $599, meaning that the price difference between the two is going to be anywhere from $100 to $200. In terms of the design, the two are very similar. They both have this matte glass finish on the back, which looks especially great in this phantom black color that I have here. One of the things I love about the matte black is that it holds up much better to fingerprints. It also feels nicer in the touch, though the glass that is used is not the same. So the S23 uses Gorilla Glass Victus 2, where the 22 has Gorilla Glass Victus 1. And the Victus 2 is meant to be even better in terms of crack resistance, though I can tell you from day-to-day use, unfortunately, both of these do scratch easily. So I definitely recommend you get a screen protector regardless of which you choose, and I'll be sure to leave my favorite linked in the description. And then looking extra close at the frame here, you can see that both have a glossy aluminum frame, which does have a very slight curve, and as a result, makes it really comfortable to use in the hand, equally between the S23 and the S22, and is also why I think ultimately these phones are more comfortable than, say, the iPhone 14, which has a more flatter, boxier edge. If you are curious about how the iPhone 14 compares to the S23, I have done a more thorough comparison video, which I'll be sure to leave linked in the description. One minor difference though, when we look at the frames of the two phones, is that on the S23, the side buttons are positioned just ever so slightly higher, and this is a more comfortable place, giving you better reach when using the phone in one hand. But the biggest difference when it comes to the design is the camera modules, where as you can see, the S22 has a single module which sort of incorporates all three lenses, where the 23 individually houses the lenses. And this is actually more akin to what you get on the 23 Ultra, which is, in my opinion, the best looking phone out right now, which is why ultimately I do prefer the look here of the S23. It's just a little bit cleaner, and I also like that you get ever so slightly less table wobble on the S23. Great if you're typing out a message whilst your phone is on a desk. And when it comes to the displays, both are 6.1-inch displays, meaning you get that perfect balance between one-handed usability, as well as still a large enough screen to really enjoy your content. Now, 6.1 inches, I think, is that sweet spot for most people, and both have that size. Both also share a Full HD Plus or 425 ppi, meaning you get a lot of high resolution, meaning that text, images, anything you look at is going to be super crisp on both of these displays. But I think even more important is that both of these displays have a 120Hz refresh rate, meaning that any movement on screen, whether you're scrolling between text, switching between apps, it's all going to be buttery smooth. And it is really great to see Samsung retain this on these phones. Now, another cool thing is that the refresh rate is adaptable, so it can go all the way down to 48Hz, and Samsung does this as a way to preserve battery power. I'm sure this helps on both phones, though I can tell you that the battery life between them is very different, but more battery life in a sec. Both displays are also dynamic AMOLED displays, meaning that colors are really going to pop and help bring your content to life, where the whites are going to be super bright and the darks are going to be truly black. Samsung does displays like no other. I would say they are the best in the smartphone game, and this really shows here on the 22 as well as, of course, on the 23. Both are great displays, though there are some minor differences, so if you do compare them side by side, I have found that the 22 has a slight green tinge in terms of the color reproduction, where the 23 has a slightly more neutral and more balanced color profile, which I do prefer ultimately. Now again, this will vary slightly phone to phone, but this is how my 22 and 23 compare. I also found that on the 23, you get a little bit more contrast, and this makes things look even sharper than they already do on the 22. But I think more importantly than that, the S23's display is considerably brighter by 450 nits, and this is something that you appreciate during normal day-to-day use, but really need when you're out in the sun. I love how both phones retain the minimalistic pinhole camera right on the front here, taking up very little screen space, and the ultrasonic fingerprint sensor that you get on both phones here works equally great, fast, and reliable. Now let's turn to the back and take a look at the cameras, as while on paper these are quite similar, the results that these cameras produce in terms of the photos and videos, they are actually quite different. Now in terms of the specs, we get a triple lens camera system on both with a main 50 megapixel lens, a 12 megapixel ultra wide lens, and a 10 megapixel 3x telephoto lens. Now there is no denying that this year the S23 Ultra got much more camera upgrades, especially that 200 megapixel new main sensor. But the S23 does add some refinements and again creates, I think, even better photos and videos when compared to the S22. Let's compare some real-world examples. When it comes to the color reproduction, I found that the S23 has a slightly warmer color temperature, and this creates a more pleasing image. You can see this here in this comparison photo of the flowers and also in this example here. And then when it comes to contrast, I found there to be slightly more on the S22, where the 23 has a slightly more of a flat look, and you can see this in the bricks as well as the paint of the wall, again creating a more true-to-life photo on the S23. When it came to the sharpness, the two were actually very close. We see good detail retention both in the buildings, the skyline, and also the water. However, in this close-up shot of my couch, you can see more details in the texture on the S23. When it comes to the dynamic range, again, both do really good, but the S23 does take the edge, retaining more detail in the darker parts of the cars here, and you can also see this when we look closely at the pots of the plants. And then when it comes to the bokeh, this is the shallow depth of field look. You get better looking and more bokeh on the S23, making it especially great for those portrait shots. Looking specifically at the ultra wide lens, I found the S23 to be slightly more sharp and again more accurate in colors, where the S22 here has a slight magenta tone. Flipping over to the selfie camera, the S22 is actually sharper and in my opinion has better skin tones, but the S23 does have a more shallow depth of field and again also better dynamic range. If you look at my coat and my scarf, you can see more detail retained there. And then when you're not taking photos of the moon, Samsung is known for its low light photography, and here too both the S22 and the S23 are amongst the best, but once again the S23 has the edge with less grain and noise when looking at the wall in the background, as well as the darker parts of this delicious cup of coffee. And finally, comparing some video, although the video is still not as good as I would say it is on the iPhone, you still get solid video performance from both phones. I found the S23 to be even more stable, and here too the S23 is able to shoot at 8K 30 FPS compared to 8K 24 FPS that you get on the S22. Now 30 FPS was much better frame rate for sharing online and posting here on YouTube. Overall, both the S22 and the S23 have some really impressive cameras, and they perform very well today, firmly amongst the best. Though I will say that the S23 does have the edge. In most of the scenarios that I compared the two, I generally prefer the results from the S23. And if you are planning to take photos often with your phone, this does matter. Now, before we compare the battery life, as well as the longevity and the performance, the areas where I think these two phones actually differ the most, it is important to protect your phone and increase its longevity. And this is where Mouse comes in, providing a range of cases available for the S23, S23 Plus, and S23 Ultra. Now there's three reasons why I really like these cases. There's durability, functionality, and design. All cases use Mouse's AeroShock protective material that absorbs impact in the event of a drop. Even their Clarity 2.0 case has this feature, and it's actually two versions of this case, one that also incorporates MagSafe, bringing MagSafe compatibility to the Galaxy line. A fantastic way to quickly mount your phone to charge and also use wallet accessories. The clear case also comes in this iridescent dawn look, very bold. Speaking of added features, the Evolution Interlock case takes things to the next level, incorporating into Mouse's broad range of accessories, letting you instantly attach your phone to a tripod, your bike, and much more. I've actually done a full video on this system, and it really is the best I've seen so far. When using these cases in the hand, you get a real sense of quality, and you can just tell that these are constructed to last. They've even thought about the fine details, like on the Aeromet Fiber case, the ridges on the sides are angled to increase grip. The buttons move freely, so retain that satisfying click, and crucial to me, all cases add surface protection to the display and cameras. the broad range of designs really let you make your phone your own. I mean, check out this cool walnut finish or the fine grain on this genuine leather case. A great way to stand out from the crowd. To learn more about this durable and functional line of cases from Mouse, be sure to head to the link in the description. Now, if you've seen my review of last year's S22, you will know that this phone unfortunately fell short when it came to the battery life. And the question is, has the S23 improved on this? Well, the answer is yes. Thanks to having both a slightly larger battery and more importantly, I think, a better optimized processor, the battery life on the S23 is significantly better. Now, to give you some numbers here, I would say that the S22, I got around 5 to 6 hours of screen on time, where on the S23, I got around 7 to 8, putting it on par with the iPhone 14 and 14 Pro. And this difference really is crucial, as this means that the S22 is an almost all-day phone, where the S23 is a true all-day phone. And with lighter use, you can even stretch this to a day and a half. For me, battery life really is essential, and it is so good to see Samsung have improved this on the S23. By the way, both phones use USB-C to charge, and this works great at 25 watts, though I do wish Samsung brought the even faster 45 watt charging that you get on the 23 Plus down to the regular 23 as well. Still, 25 watts is relatively fast, and of course you also get Qi wireless charging on both. So as you can see, these two phones really differ when it comes to the battery life, and this I think is largely due to the fact that the S23 comes with a new Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chip, which is much better optimized specifically for Galaxy phones, and this doesn't just have an impact on the battery life, but also on the performance. Now, both phones run Android 13, though the S23 gets One UI 5.1, where the S22 is currently running One UI 5.0, though we'll likely get an update in the future as well. Generally speaking, during normal day-to-day use, both phones keep up well. The same 8GB of RAM mean that switching between apps is fast, and they also stay open relatively long in the background. Whether you're doing productivity apps, watching videos, you really get a flagship feel. However, in more heavier apps such as photo or video editing, the S23 does load faster, and this is also reflected in the Geekbench scores, where the S23 takes a big leap both in single-core performance as well as multi-core performance. But these are just numbers on paper, and while it is good to look at these and I think take these into account when comparing the phones, what ultimately matters most is the real-world experience that you get from both. And after using both of these phones extensively, I can tell you that the overall experience is just significantly smoother on the S23. For example, you get far less random lags, stutters, or even glitches. Overall, the Android experience on the S23 just feels more refined compared to the S22, and this is really great to see. And again, I think this is largely due to the better optimization between the hardware and software that you get on the S23, and this is a difference I notice every day. Also worth noting that unlike the previous S22, where some regions had the Snapdragon chip and others had the inferior Exynos chip, this year the S23, all regions come with the Snapdragon chip. So this takes some of the guessing work out of the buying process. Now let's talk about longevity, an area that is super important as both of these phones are expensive and, well, they have to last. So today, the S22 is expected to get around 3 more years of software updates, new features, and security updates. Compared to that, the S23 is going to get 4 more years of software updates and 5 more years of security updates. And this ultimately does mean that the S23 will last you longer, making it a better long-term investment. And if you actually take up the number of years that both of these phones can last and then divide the cost over the years, the S23 is actually a better value phone. Comparing a few smaller things like the haptic motor, I would say these are the same on both. In other words, amongst the best when it comes to the Android side. Though comparing the speakers, I found the S23 to be louder, also have more detail in the highs, and generally give more depth. And this is something you notice when you're watching videos or listening to music. At the end of the day, both of these are really great phones, but in my opinion, for a relatively small price increase, the S23 does add a lot. You get that slightly better design with also a brighter display, great in the sun. You get improved camera performance, much better battery life, again comparing most day battery life on the 22 and true all day battery life on the 23. But most important of all, I think, is the smoother overall experience and longer longevity that you get on the S23. And altogether, this creates a significant difference. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you should upgrade to the 23 if you're on the S22, but if you are picking between these phones from, say, an older phone, thinking of getting your first Galaxy phone, my advice is to spend the extra $100 to $200 on getting the S23 instead, as it provides a far better overall package. But anyway guys, those are my thoughts on comparing the S22 versus the S23. What I'm seeing here is Samsung taking a good phone and making it even better year by year, and this makes me really excited for the future to see where this line of phone goes next. Now, if you haven't seen it yet, I highly recommend watching my first 10 things to do on the Galaxy S23 to maximize its performance, as well as even extend that battery life further. And again, if you are interested, I have also done a more thorough comparison video to the iPhone 14. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I will see you guys in the next video. Let me know if you have any questions, and take care.